Hello! Welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with Daniel Miessler, David Joseph, George Ortega, Trick Slattery, and our newest guest, Neal Gafter. And we don't have a full understanding of his position yet on free will, so I want to turn it over to him and let him explain at the beginning of this episode what he thinks about the free will issue and where he stands.
All right. Hi, I'm Neal Gafter. I sort of got involved on this reading Daniel's blog about free will. And the reason I started commenting on his blog is because he's starting with a definition of free will that I think is probably more relaxed than you want. In other words, it allows too much to have free will. The consequence of that is, based on what we know about physics, sort of everything has free will. And I'm interested in refining the definition. I don't really take a position on whether we have free will or not. I'm sort of more interested in what definition of free will sort of makes the most sense from the point of view of helping us figure out how we should behave in the world. And that might be actually different than what you're interested in, but depending on your definition, I'm perfectly willing to believe we either do have free will or don't have free will.
So Neal, what's your definition?
I don't think I have a definition of free will, because I have to say it's not an important topic to me. What is important is that we use logic and reason to come to our positions about any given definition.
All right, but then you said that you said that physics, pretty much suggests that everything has free will. What's your reasoning behind that?
I did not say that.
Yeah, let me try and help. So I was actually really obsessed with the same thing. I still am. And I tried to make a definition, which I don't remember off the top of my head. It's something like the ability to have willfully chosen otherwise. And I thought I had a tight definition. And Neal was basically not even engaging in the free will debate with me. He was more so correcting me claiming that I had a good definition. Would you say that's right, Neal?
Well, that's part of it. You were claiming to demonstrate that your definition that is not satisfied by the universe. And I'm actually fine with your definition as long as you don't mind everything in the world having free will based on your definition. So you would claimed to have proven something about your definition that sort of contradicts logic and what we know about physics.
Right.
Well, my definition
okay, one at a time, please.
Let me just say, I tried to add the word willfully in there to specify something that had will, but I have now agreed with Neal that the definition needs work. So like I said, it's been a productive conversation, but I think this is really interesting because a lot of the debate going on in that same thread has continued with Chandler's friend Marvin. Basically, Marvin is talking about a very practical version of free will that, of course, is consistent with determinism. That's why he's a compatibilist. But I love what Neal is saying here in that he's fine with believing that free will exists because it all hinges on how you define it. So maybe we could just, some of the veterans here could start with where this podcast believes the definition is.
All right, let's start with Augustine, because he coined the term free will in 380 AD, and he did it relative to responsibility and, in his view, God's punishment. He said, God couldn't punish human beings for what we did if we didn't have a free will. It would be unfair. So, without, dealing with the theology, that's one way to understand it. That free will, if we had a free will, we would be fundamentally morally responsible for our behavior. But then there's another clearer, I think, understanding. I think we would have a free will if our decisions and our actions would be up to us in a way that nothing that's not in our control would be compelling the actions. In other words, our actions would be free from influence from things that are not under our control.
I think that's a fair way of putting it, and I know Trick had something to say too.
So
Well,
I,
I define my semantic the same, pretty much almost the same as Daniel, except I don't say willing. I say the ability to have done otherwise of one's own accord. In other words, that any otherwise happening that takes place, it would be up to the willer to actually make that happen, basically.
okay,
So
so there's a couple. Go ahead.
that kind of addresses indeterminism, in which indeterminism leads to an otherwise situation, but yet an indeterministic event can't really be a willed event. Can't be something that's up to the chooser.
Okay, so
So go ahead.
I want to comment on a couple of phrases I've heard. We talk about our decisions. I've heard the phrase "under our control." I've heard the phrase "of our own accord." Okay, and my first reaction on hearing these phrases is that these phrases really mean the same thing as free will, and we're defining free will in terms of itself. So,
Well, Daniel, we're using those terms colloquially. We're not using them literally.
Well, that was Neal. This is Daniel.
Oh, I'm sorry, Neal. Yeah.
so
Neal,
then
when we say that, we quote unquote decide, but we don't really fundamentally actually decide.
okay, so then let me ask a different question. When we say we decide, does that mean that processes in our body, for example, thinking using our brains, cause an outcome of a decision?
Well, because of the causal regression behind those processes that extends to before we were born, it's most technical to say that as far as we know, the Big Bang, as the first event that we're familiar with, that we understand, causes all of our decisions.
So you're assuming things that we know about or have strong evidence for about quantum physics and Bell's inequality are not in fact true? You're sort of a pre-1900 view of physics.
Neal, if we were to consider or posit that certain events in our universe are uncaused, they're random, like certain interpretations of the quantum mechanics might suggest, that wouldn't give us a free will either, because we can't really claim authorship of a decision that's actually random or uncaused.
So that's a good point, and I want to talk about that for a moment. So what does authorship mean? To me, okay, if I, as an individual and as a person, I have lots of experiences that are external to me. I have been taught things by people, and I think about those things, and I produce what are new thoughts, and I write them down in a book. Now, the words I use, I learned from someone else. The sentence structure I learned, but those ideas were formed and combined in my body to become unique things. And we have a concept of copyright that's based on authorship, right? So I write a book, I claim authorship of that book. It originated in my mind, and I am therefore the author of the book. Now, you clearly are meaning something completely different when you say authorship.
Yeah. So if I can jump in real quick, I think this is something we've talked about. This is my main focus and interest in free will right now, is this, I don't want to use dualism, but this dichotomy between the absolute, which is what George was talking about, and what I think free will skeptics are ultimately talking about. And that's kind of like the reality of the atoms bumping into each other. The reality is that physics and chemistry led to those things being written in that book, and those are things we don't have control over, so we didn't really author anything. But
well, again, we do have control over them in the sense that I had control over them because my body caused those events to happen.
Well, yeah, okay. But your body also causes, your breathing, and you don't necessarily have control.
Right.
You know,
So
your body
it's
causes blood cells to split and do
sure. So
mitosis.
only the causes that flow through my intelligence and conscious processes can properly be called authorship.
Right, and now we're talking about, can we come up to a useful definition? One thing I want to just clarify on this, though, is I believe there's a practical world where these words mean something. Like authorship is absolutely valuable. Copyright is valuable in the context of human experience. And this is actually what we talked about in the last podcast, where I was sort of defending a compatibilist position. So those have meaning and they're useful. Anything that's useful, I mean, I don't think we could just discard. But there's also this other level of truth, which is what I think the classical free will skeptic is talking about. And the question is, how do these combine or merge into a definition that contains them both?
Right. So, Neil, for example, even though our body is involved in the causal chain that leads to our authoring, let's say a book or whatever, it's only a link in this causal chain, because if we go through the causal model, we realize that that there were causes for what our body caused, and there were
Sure.
causes to those causes.
Sure, but I'll make 2 points about that. First of all, those causes and those effects were not the only possible outcomes. Okay, so that's one point. And second, when we talk about authorship, decisions, and doing things of our own accord, what we mean precisely is what our body does through the application of our brains and our intelligence. That's what we mean by it. It's
like
true that there are physical processes, but that's what it means.
I'd like to jump in here on this alternate possibilities. So you're saying basically that if you wrote a book, you could have chosen not to write a book, correct?
Or I could have chosen to write different contents. Yeah.
Okay. What would have caused you not to have written the book?
So so you want to know what sort of molecular things could have been different that have caused me to choose one word over another?
How could a molecular structure have been different is what I'm asking you.
That's the way pretty much everything in our universe works. The only reason
I'm saying either that molecular structure was caused to be different by other factors, other variables, or there was no variables at all that caused it. An acausal event happened, which you couldn't have willed.
Well, first of all, your dichotomy is false, because that's not the way physics works. Physics, I mean, when there are causes and effects, the effects have a probability, especially at the
probability is epistemic, not ontic. There's a difference between a probability that we fathom, basically we try to understand, because we don't have all the variables, so we create a probability, but it doesn't mean that probability is really an ontic probability, that it actually exists as probability.
Right.
Either something is acausal or causal. If something's not caused, then it's automatically acausal. It's non-caused.
That is not true. That is not true.
The two are in opposition to each other.
No.
Hold on, Trick. Let him explain.
They are not in opposition to each other.
They are. Go ahead.
Well, let's suppose a die is truly random. Okay. Then you would say that it's completely uncaused whether one comes up or not. But that's not true. Because of the structure of the die, it's more likely that a one does not come up than a one comes up.
The structure of a die, see, a 1 in 6 chance for a die to roll is epistemic. That means that we don't know what the physics involved, so we say it's a...
Yeah, but he's talking about true randomness. But
yes, I'm saying if such a thing as a truly random die existed, I'm not asserting that it does yet. I will do that in a moment. But if such a thing as a truly random die were to exist, right, then it's not completely random whether it's a one or not. The probability depends on the structure of the die and its environment and the way it's thrown.
Well, Neil, you seem to be contradicting yourself. You say if a die is truly random. Now, when you say truly random, that means without cause. That means, completely random.
Right.
Yes, but here's the thing. There's not a 50-50 chance that a 1 comes up, and a 50-50 chance that a 2 comes up, and a 50-50 chance that a 3 comes up. Even
Well,
if I posit a completely random die, there is some...
Neil, the reason for that is because the concept of randomness is incoherent in a sense. In other words, the reason that you can derive probabilities for a die is because the die isn't truly random. The die,
Right.
would be causal.
All right, I think we need to dive into Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen argument and the Bell inequalities, and our understanding of physics. So basically, Einstein wrote a paper with a couple of others in which they claimed that the whole formalism of quantum mechanics must be incomplete because there are aspects of reality that are not described by quantum mechanics. And they're specifically touching on what appears to be the random elements of physics. And,
yes.
And one could posit hidden variables that characterize the state of affairs in quantum mechanics. And if you do that and have an explanation that is consistent with observations, then you would have a more complete theory of quantum mechanics.
Can I jump in here real quick? Let me just say, this sounds to me like a God of the gaps argument, where you're saying we don't fully understand physics, and there's a little slice in here, and since I believe we have free will, that's probably where it's coming from, this slice that we don't know about yet.
Well, I'm not claiming that I believe we have free will. I'm not I'm not saying that, okay?
Yeah, Daniel, let him finish.
I'm just saying
Neil,
I'm just saying Einstein wrote a paper. So far, that's all I've said is he wrote a paper.
Right. So explain related to the finish explaining and then related to the free will thing, right?
Okay.
Before you finish it, though, are you saying you agree with the EPR experiment? You agree with Einstein, or do you agree with like a Copenhagen interpretation, which goes against Einstein? So there's two different theories. There's the indeterminism, and then Einstein actually was a determinist. So I'm not sure what side you're actually taking here. I guess.
So far, I'm just stating facts. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not taking positions yet.
Okay, because Einstein's position, the EPR paradox, was to show the problem with the randomness of quantum mechanics, basically.
Right. But
so
it turns out the question is one that's testable.
What is?
The question of whether or not there are hidden local variables that capture the state of particles.
It hasn't been tested yet, though, because we have a number of different quantum interpretations, and all of them are equally valid.
Well, no,
some of them are deterministic.
Oh, really? So are you telling me there have not been tests of Bell theorem?
No, Trick. I think what he's referring to, in other words, yes, I think we've established that local variables do not explain, for example, like entanglement. So and they have tested that.
Non-local variables do, but
right. So obviously, Neil, I think we can agree that Einstein was wrong because he concluded that there must have been hidden local variables. So now what we understand, because of the tests, is that there are apparently some non-local variables that explain this phenomenon.
Well, that is one possible interpretation, but saying that there are non-local variables requires that there is a way for the particles to communicate state faster than the speed of light, and, for example, backwards through time as well. Equivalent.
Well, faster than the speed of light, the backwards through time isn't really necessitated for that.
It's equivalent.
Well, why do you say that? Why would instantaneous communication require going back in time?
Because depending on whether two things are simultaneous or not, depends on your state of your frame of reference.
Yeah.
Yes, And there will be frames. If once you're traveling faster than the speed of light, there are frames of reference in which you're traveling.
Yeah, but it's not saying that it's traveling like we have quantum entanglement, and that's not actually saying that it's traveling faster than the speed of light. It's just saying that the two are happening simultaneously. It's an interaction that is
in
kind of
someone's frame of
outside of
reference,
our conception of time.
yeah,
Right.
but in someone's frame of reference, it will have occurred in the past.
Well, but that applies to just standard physics. I mean, like, yes, we have this, and it's actually not a time relevant thing. It's actually a causality relevant. In other words, like it appears, that one is going before or after the other, but more technically, one is actually causing, the other.
Well, no. To put it another way, that the effects are preceding the causes.
Exactly. Yeah. No.
That would
Well,
be...
no. That's
No.
that's
not.
the misinterpretation. In other words, like it appears like something is happening before. It appears like there's an effect before a cause time wise, but then I think they can demonstrate that the causality is still intact, without using a time reference.
Yeah, so it's a frame of reference discord that's causing the observation.
Yeah. So I think if you want to, the original, long ago idea of determinism, as you mentioned, Augustine, it started out as actually a question that is religion-based. And there are also, it started out by other philosophers looking at the sort of what was considered a self-evident principle that events are caused by other events that are proximate. Okay, at this point, we pretty much have to throw out the proximate. And
we don't have to throw it out, but yeah, if we accept Bell's inequality, yes, we have to throw out the approximate.
If you accept what has been over and over again experimentally supported, then you pretty much have to throw out the idea of proximate causality.
Well, I mean, Neal, actually, I think what we would have to say is that both proximate and non-local causality explain phenomenon. And most generally, in terms of causality, you have the Big Bang representing the entire universe at that moment, causing the entire universe at the next moment, which causes the entire universe at the next moment. So you actually only have one causal chain within one time frame.
Well, that's yes, but whether or not each of those steps was the only possible next future.
It has to be.
Oh,
logically,
really?
It has to be.
How so?
Okay. Well, let's say
there's
you have
only
a
one
cause
universe.
Let's say you have a cause that causes something causes X to happen. Okay.
Yes.
To say that exact same configuration, that exact same cause causes Y instead of X, basically creates a self-contradiction. You now have variables that create X, and you have that exact same variable that creates not X, basically.
Yes.
So it's a contradiction in terms. You're creating a contradiction, basically.
I don't understand how. I don't understand how that's a contradiction. I don't understand why.
X and not X is a contradiction. You can't
Sure,
have variables that cause X and the exact same variables that do not cause
that
X.
Is true.
Isn't this
one of those?
Isn't this a problem of the question of whether or not randomness is on the left side of the equation, or if it's outside of the equation?
Right. We're just talking about causality right now. So I'm not an indeterminist. I'm a hard incompatibilist, meaning I'm not sure if the universe is deterministic or indeterministic. But if it is indeterministic, that means some events have no cause whatsoever. That's a different situation than a cause leading to two separate possibilities. Two separate possibilities for a cause is a contradiction in terms. An acausal event popping into existence leading to that otherwise situation or the other possibility is a totally separate thing. That is logically coherent, even though it's kind of messed up.
Okay,
but
so
that would
you're
be
saying,
out of our willfulness.
Okay, so Trick, you're just saying that the word cause in and of itself means that which produces a particular outcome.
I'm saying that it would be logically incoherent if it didn't. it would be a self-contradictory cause.
And Neal, I think, all right, so like more to the point. So, I mean, we're arguing causality versus acausality, randomness and all. But the stronger point is that either option or any combination of the two
Yep.
would prohibit free will. How do you respond to that?
Again, that's the way I got involved in this. Is it depends on what you mean by free will.
Right. You have to start with the definition.
We need to start with a definition, and I better not hear words like authorship, of our own accord, under our control, or our decisions, because all of those is a self.
They have answers in the question.
Neal, no. The idea, for example, if you're at a restaurant and somebody spikes your drink and you go out and do something illegal, and you didn't know about it, I think that you could agree that wasn't, you didn't do it under your free will, because something that was not in your control made you do it. So basically, this causality and this acausality both serve as that agent that basically makes us not in control of what we do.
I guess what I believe about the universe is that there are things that influence outcomes, but don't determine them. Okay, the same way that at the quantum level, we say that the description of the system has a probability to be in future states, but it's not inevitable that any particular future state is a result.
But Neal, that wouldn't help your argument, because the only place you can go from there is to suggest that some things are not caused. And again, if something isn't caused, we can't be claiming to be causing it.
So hang on a second. Hang on. Let's back up. Even when we look at the tiny particle level, at the quantum level, the outcomes are not uncaused. They are correlated with causes. They are not determined by causes. They are correlated with causes. They are not completely uncaused. They are not completely determined. They are correlated.
Neal, but you're still facing the same argument that if they're caused, the causal regression makes free will impossible. And if, as you're claiming, they may not be caused, we can't claim to be, deciding anything.
But it's neither. I'm saying it's neither.
It's neither.
It's neither.
Yeah, that just
I'm saying that the outcome is correlated. Maybe the word cause is the wrong word. I'm saying the outcome of events at the quantum level are correlated with the state of other particles in the vicinity.
Excuse me. Now the word correlated. I think we need to talk about that word correlated. What do you mean by correlated?
I mean that it is neither determined by variables either hidden or knowable of those variables, and that the outcome is yet appears over some probabilistic distribution based on the particular situation.
Neal, but the problem with that is that the definition of free will requires that we, of our free will, are quote unquote causing whatever it is we're doing. So in other words, like, free will requires the causality that actually prohibits it.
No, it requires us to influence things. It doesn't require us to force things to happen. It requires us to influence things.
But you just said that
influence.
No, but so here's the problem. Like, if you're a fish, I mean, this is kind of Dennett's argument. If you're a fish, basically Dennett is saying anything that happens inside of my body is basically, that's where you draw the line for authorship. And the problem is that works for fish, it works for computers. So, I mean, anything that means everything means nothing, right? You can't define free will as something in your body was part of a causal chain or had an influence on something in the future, because that just applies to everything.
Sure, and I would say that for the purposes of authorship, we need to say that for example, for a book, that I apply my intelligence.
Well, let's just say, I mean, you can't have influence without causality. So let's talk about that for a second, because I don't understand how you can say influence yet not cause.
Wait, you can't. So hang on a second. If by the word causality you mean influencing in a sort of that
What
a
does
single
influence mean to
outcome. Influence means, well, it's. I'm going to use words, but I'm afraid they mean something different to you than they do to me.
No, no, go ahead.
One object influences another by
Through what mechanism does it influence it?
well, I mean, it's physics typically, but the point
So,
is,
so the particles influence the other particles because they interact with each other.
sure,
Correct?
yes,
That
yes.
is causality. I don't understand. There's no
Okay.
distinction between that and
Okay,
causality.
if that's all you mean by causality, then that's not a deterministic outcome.
It is.
Yes, it is.
No,
Well,
it
all
isn't.
right, guys,
Absolutely it
no,
is.
no, wait a minute. Determinism.
How do you just because there's an influence doesn't mean that that the other particle has no choice but to behave in one particular specific way?
Then you're talking about something that has a contradictory influence. Basically, you're saying that something can influence X, and at the same time not influence X.
But Neal,
So basically,
Look. Let's just put this at the human level. I can try.
Well,
and,
that's too high of a level for this.
I can influence you by making arguments, but it isn't going
Right.
to force you to take a particular position. Okay,
But
it might make it more likely
Neal,
or less likely that you take a
let me
particular
explain
position.
the distinction between influence and causality in terms of prediction and actuality. If you influence, somebody's decision, and you're kind of like saying it's an influence, right? But it doesn't result in the person actually, making the
It
decision
doesn't
based on.
necessarily
Hold
result.
on. Right.
Right.
Then we can say it's an influence. However, if the influence after the fact, if the influence results in the person acting or deciding in a certain way, and we're talking after the fact now, then that influence is no longer an influence, it becomes a compulsion. It's something that caused the action.
Okay. So I guess what I'm saying is that influences don't necessarily result in compulsions.
Well, again, you're talking before the fact. I think, for example, our genes influence our behavior, right? But that's kind of like they potentially influence it because we can override their influence with our heredity, our learning. But like ultimately, after we've done a behavior, right, we can conclude that either genes or the environment or a combination of the two cause the behavior. They're no longer influences, they're actual causes.
But we cannot necessarily. But we cannot necessarily conclude that was the only possible outcome of that combination of influences.
All right, but Neal, that's inconsequential because like determinism suggests or implies that we can predict. Whereas we're saying, no, fine. Prediction, we may or may not be able to predict. We don't have all the factors.
No, I'm not talking about prediction. I'm not talking about prediction. I'm not talking about a person trying to figure it out, or even some oracular computer that can know everything trying to figure it out. I'm talking whether it actually is the only possible outcome.
Can we get back to?
And I'm saying that's impossible. I'm sorry, that's impossible without an acausal event. So you have all these that happen, these like thousands of influences that happen, but they couldn't have happened otherwise, giving a entirely causal universe. We need an acausal event, an event that doesn't have any influence at all, pop into existence for an otherwise to occur.
Yeah,
otherwise,
we need to get back to what you were saying, Trick. We need to get back. We never answered it correctly. You have the same exact variables resulting in X or Y. What is your response to that, Neal?
I'm saying what I'm saying is that at the quantum level, I believe that all actions are acausal in the sense that Trick means them, that as Trick defines. All events are acausal.
Well,
however, because they obey probability distributions, we're able to make predictions with more or less accuracy about events at a macroscopic level.
Okay, so the question then becomes...
Hold on. Neal, you say that at the quantum level, all events are acausal, the way Trick was describing it. Can you describe one quantum phenomenon or event that would justify that conclusion?
Sure, you measure the spin of an electron, and it says it's either up or down, and there's nothing that you can do. There's little that you can do ahead of time to predict that, except to measure another entangled electron.
Okay,
How do we know if that's truth or epistemic?
That's why I introduced the concepts of prediction. In other words, like what we have to distinguish between is prediction and causality. Determinism, suggests and implies prediction. Fine, we may not be able to predict the behavior or the spin of a particle, but that's an entirely different matter of whether the particle behavior is caused or uncaused.
Yes, that's true, but because these hidden variables can't be local, the only way that you can have determinism of things in the universe is if it's only the universe as a whole that is deterministic.
Well, that's actually the most accurate answer. Yes, it's the universe as a whole that's causing everything that's happening right now, starting with the Big Bang.
But first of all, we don't know whether that's true or not, and there's no way for us to test whether that's true or not.
I agree with you on that, Neal.
So going back to what you were saying, though, Neal. So I feel like a jump is being made when we're doing, and by the way, I'm definitely not anywhere close to being an expert in this, but it seems like there's a gap here. So you say you measure and you don't know if it's up or down. Aren't we making a major jump if we measure and it's sometimes up, we measure and it's sometimes down, and we don't know why? And here we are in the infancy of scientific understanding, and we're like, well, I don't have a good answer, so therefore it's acausal.
No.
Isn't that a massive jump?
Yes, it would be if it weren't possible for us to test whether or not hidden variables exist, even if we don't know a lot about their nature. And that is the point of the tests of Bell's inequalities, is to test whether Einstein's prediction that there are hidden local variables, that are aspects of reality that are present as hidden variables, but they're inherently part of the nature of the particles. They're there even if we don't or can't measure them. And what the tests demonstrate is that is indeed not the case. That the only sense in which there could be hidden variables is if those hidden variables are not local.
Bell's inequalities doesn't test for non-local hidden variables. It only tests for local variables.
Indeed. So if there are hidden variables, they are hidden variables that do not have a location. They are everywhere in the universe at the same time.
No,
right.
doesn't. No, non-locality.
You completely lost me.
Non-locality doesn't mean that they're everywhere. Non-locality simply means that a particle can be at one side of the universe, another particle, its partner, could be at the opposite side, and there's instantaneous communication between them. It doesn't have to involve the rest of the universe.
Right. It does depend on the quantum interpretation you're postulating. For example, Bohmian mechanics. The pilot wave theory basically says that it depends on the entire state of the entire universe. So it's kind of based on the entire state of the universe. But yeah, I mean, either way, there are deterministic models that have not been disproven yet.
You probably cannot disprove. That's one of the points, is you probably cannot distinguish these non-local hidden variable models from
that's the problem, right?
From whether things are truly indeterministic.
Right. So we have the Copenhagen interpretation that's basically indeterministic, and then we have, Bohmian mechanics, and then we have many worlds interpretations. All these interpretations are mathematically aligned with the experiments.
Sure.
So we don't exactly know which one is the case, but if it is the case that there are non-caused events, acausal events, then those can never be willed events, and they would just have an interaction that we would have no control over. And that's basically what we're saying.
Yeah.
So hang on a second. You can't. I do not believe you can classify events into those that were deterministically claused and those that are indeterminate, that have no correlation with prior causes.
I think you can logically. I think if you're talking about an event that takes place, you can say that if it wasn't caused, then obviously it's a non-caused event. These are, like I said, in opposition.
That's fine. But what I'm saying is, if we take one of the interpretations other than the Copenhagen interpretation, if we take one of the interpretations like the Copenhagen interpretation or the many worlds hypothesis, then all events are uncaused.
No, the many worlds is a deterministic interpretation, but
what?
Yeah, the many worlds interpretation is entirely deterministic. It's actually as deterministic as any other.
That's just a branch,
except for the fact that it depends on what you mean by free will. Again, if I go back to Daniel's definition, where free will is if for any previous decision I could have chosen otherwise, then yes, I could before that decision.
No.
I could have ended up
not with a many worlds interpretation. With a many worlds interpretation, whether you do something or not depends on how the superposition state decoheres into the specific environment that you're in. So it all depends on the specific environment. It's a totally
the many
causal.
Worlds is that the many worlds interpretation, as I understand it, and this is the whole point of many worlds, is that you can decohere into multiple different universes.
No, but you're only on one branch, though.
Yeah, each decohere into their own environment, and it specifically decoheres it into the only environment that it can decohere.
You're only in one.
It's a total.
That's right. Well, so hang on a second. When I made my decision, I had not decohered.
Yeah, but you're only, again, like Daniel is
branching.
saying, you only exist in one of the universes. What happens is any other universe is inconsequential.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is now a logical fallacy called retrospective determinism, right? And the logical fallacy is basically saying, whatever decision I make, after the fact, I only made one decision,
Neal,
so it doesn't matter about the other universe.
You're forgetting that you need control over the process.
Yeah, you have no control over that process. Basically, the environment that you're in right now, if you decide to write the book, and then the other universe in which you didn't write the book, those had to happen the exact same way that they happened. It couldn't be the case that the two were reversed, for example, in the many worlds interpretation.
The question of whether or not I had free will was a question that applied to me before I made the decision. And I had not decohered into one of those two universes. Okay?
It doesn't matter. Either way.
You're not controlling the branching.
You couldn't decide which branch to take. You couldn't even decide prior to then.
But it was my decision which branch to take.
No, it wasn't.
No, you experienced
that's exactly what that's what it means to make a decision. I either decide to write a book or I don't decide to write a book.
Well, now you're defining
but it's a causal decision.
You're defining free will as experiencing the process of decision.
No,
Daniel,
I'm saying what it means to make a decision is that our intelligence becomes part of the causal chain to an event that could have been otherwise.
Couldn't have been otherwise.
If you apply that to dominoes,
if there's two universes I could decohere into, then it could have been otherwise.
Daniel,
because
Neal,
the way they I'm sorry, go ahead, George.
Neal, if you apply that to dominoes, basically what you're saying is like the next to last domino caused the other one to topple the last one. But what we're saying is the first domino in the chain caused that next to last one to topple the last one. So it really wasn't the decision of the next to last domino to topple it, just like there are causes to whatever quote unquote decisions we might make.
Well, that's true if that was the only possible outcome.
Yeah, let me rephrase Neal's thing, because this is exactly, I was hoping we would get to here. This is exactly the flaw that he found in my definition, and I think it's valid. It's a technicality. It's a problem with the definition. So at the moment, things could have gone different paths. Okay, the person had no control, but Neal is still correct that it could have gone down different paths.
Well,
Or
I
we
don't
don't
agree
know.
with that.
We
no, I
don't
don't
know
either.
yet which path it's going to go down. Put it that way.
Only if it's acausal could it have gone down different paths. There
Right,
needs to be an
but at the
acausal
moment,
event.
but at the moment, before it happens, I think this is
Yeah.
what Neal is saying. Before it happens, it hasn't happened yet. And if you both have will and it hasn't happened yet, then you're kind of breaking the definition. Is that what you're saying?
No, because
Neal?
that's just epistemic. Then you're just you just don't know what the outcome is, but that has nothing to do with the actuality.
But
the,
if you
the
combine that
reality.
with Neal's other point of the indeterminism part, you combine all three together, and he thinks
that's why I'm
those
trying to get.
assemble
Are we
into-
talking about indeterminism, or are we talking about a many world interpretation? So
I-
there's two different interpretations.
I agree.
There's the
I agree
Copenhagen.
I agree with you. I'm just telling you that this is the flaw that
I
I'm
think it
seeing in
actually
the
applies to
definition.
both, Trick.
It doesn't. If we're talking about an indeterministic interpretation, okay, one that has non-caused events, then yes, I totally agree that the multiple possibilities are possible. It's just that we could never will those other possibilities. On the other
Well,
hand,
hang on a second. Wait.
Okay.
If the possibility results from our mental decision and choice,
It doesn't.
of course it does. If those indeterminate
Okay.
are
Think about a entirely deterministic event that leads to your decision to eat cake, and then think an acausal event pops in, changes the structure of your brain to make you eat cheesecake instead of chocolate cake that you would have had in an entirely causal universe. You had no say over that acausal event popping into existence, changing the very structure of your brain, in which leads to you eating the cheesecake instead of the chocolate cake.
Yeah. So the problem with that argument, Trick, is you're postulating that causal events and acausal events are completely distinct. And what I'm saying is, in the Copenhagen interpretation, all events are acausal by your definition of acausal. All events.
That's not true.
It's not true.
Copenhagen doesn't apply to the macro world.
Yeah, exactly.
Copenhagen is just
Dominoes
dealing
would
with
not work in
particles.
that universe.
Pardon?
Yeah,
Well, dominoes don't always work in our universe either.
No, but they really
Sure
do.
they
They're
do.
pretty predictable.
What?
But anyway,
this is how physics works. This is how GPS works. Like the models work.
The Copenhagen interpretation says that certain events at the small scale do not have a cause, or probably do not have a cause, because there's no suggesting that it does, basically, because there's no way of figuring that out.
But
so at the go ahead.
Neal, let's go back to again, whether behavior events are causal or acausal is really inconsequential, because both make free will impossible. And I think what you're suggesting is that there's a third possibility. And
well, I want to know what you mean by free will.
Well, free will is like that we of our own free will, without anything.
I'm sorry, that's a circular definition. You can't use it in its own definition.
All right, Neal, we are acting independent of causes over which we are not in control.
Wait, we're acting independent of causes?
Right, independent of factors.
Well, that would be a very useless kind of free will.
We agree.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, could you have
free
done
will is an incoherent concept.
Yeah, you need to.
Could
you
you have
the
done
definition
otherwise? And if you could have done otherwise, could that otherwise been up to you? That's my definition.
So it depends on what you mean by up to me. If it's a result of my conscious processes, and applying my intelligence and thinking, then I would say absolutely I could. Okay. It could be otherwise.
Okay, so when you're saying that the acausal event pops in, changes the configuration of your brain,
all events are
that
acausal.
was up to you.
No, I'm sorry. All events are acausal. Trey.
Okay, so all right. So check this out. Now, check this out, Neal. Check this out. So all events are acausal. So everything moving through you is complete chaos. But the brain that it moves through.
I'm sorry. No. I didn't say they're uncorrelated.
No, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything.
So
you're saying
correlation
that
is meaningless. Correlation is meaningless without causality.
You're saying that the brain is chaos. Okay,
No,
the
I'm
whole
not.
universe is chaos.
No, I'm
And
not.
because an event moved through your brain, it automatically gets the tag of freedom.
No, no,
What,
no. I'm
what do
not.
you
I'm
mean
not
by
saying
correlation? What do you mean by correlation without causation?
uh, by cause by correlation. What I mean is that the outcome has a distribution of possibilities.
Because that's not
That
what correlation
Yeah,
basically
that's
means,
not.
that we see one event and then we see another event that kind of correlates with that event. That's what correlation means. And whether or not it's caused depends on the correlation. So if we light a match and do it 1,000 times, and the striking is a correlation, we see the correlated events and we imply causation. We infer it. We infer that there was a causation there, even though
okay?
we only see the correlation. We see
Okay.
the striking and we see the light, the flame at the end.
Yeah, and sometimes
If
it is, and sometimes it isn't.
Yeah, if the correlation does not imply causation, then it's meaningless correlation. It has not, one has nothing to do with the other at all, entirely. Even if you see it,
Okay. So
it's just
trick.
meaningless.
So trick. If causation is something that we infer by
Yes,
repeated experiments,
right.
and we do 1,000 times, we strike the match on the box and it lights every time. Does that mean that the lighting of the match is caused by striking on the box?
It just means we infer that that is probably caused. Yes.
It's infer that is probably. So what does actually cause mean? I don't want to. I'm not talking about inference. I'm not talking about inference. You brought that up.
All causality is inferred.
Well, I mean, there's an a priori argument for causality that simply, basically there's nothing that we can actually demonstrate to be uncaused. The only thing we can demonstrate is our lack of knowledge of what causes things. I mean,
Yep.
causality
No, that's one theory. No, that's one possibility. Is that things you're assuming that things are caused, but we just don't know. That's an assumption. That's not the only possibility.
I actually agree with you on this, Neil. I'm actually agnostic on whether certain events aren't caused.
The
But
problem
I
with
do.
acausality is like there's no way to
It
explain
just doesn't
it.
help you.
With causality, you explain that something caused, something else, and
Absolutely, there's no way of explaining it. That's
so,
exactly right.
No, Neil, no. I'm saying the exact opposite. With causality, everything of what that we have any knowledge of in science and in personal experience, we understand in terms of causality. There's nothing in our experience or in science that we understand in terms of acausality. So
Yeah,
that
sometimes. Yeah,
Again, that's
sometimes
the
the term
Copenhagen
mechanistic is
interpretation.
helpful here instead of
The Copenhagen
determinist.
interpretation is exactly something that
but,
we.
but
that,
more,
but it's a wrong interpretation. In other words, Copenhagen alleges that some events are quote unquote uncaused, but it has absolutely no evidence or argument for that assertion.
and there's also no evidence or argument for the assertion that they are caused. In fact, there
The,
isn't evidence against that.
the evidence for causality is that everything that we have any knowledge of, we understand within a causal framework.
Yep, it
Well,
works in that way.
except that that's well, there's. I have two comments about that. First of all, that is not true, and one example of that is quantum mechanics.
Quantum
And the
mechanics,
evidence-
we don't know. You're saying that like something is potentially acausal simply because we don't know the cause. That's illogical.
Well, you have an argument then that cannot be refuted.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's how
no,
strong
But there's a
causality
reason.
is.
There's
Neil,
a
I
reason.
actually agree with you on this, Neil. I don't think we can actually know. I don't think it's correct to say that everything has a cause. We just can't know.
I
if
agree with
everything
that
has
as
a
well.
cause on the quantum scale. So
I do want to say one more thing
it,
about this: is that we as humans are built to find causes. We are cause-finding machines. That's what our brains are taught how to do. We have an instinct that's built into us that basically says all events have prior causes, and that drive us to try and determine and understand those causes, so that we
all
can
I'm
behave
saying,
more
Neil,
efficient,
is that
more effectively in the world.
the notion of correlation without causation is irrelevant. Like even on the quantum scale, you're saying that this event, it correlates with this other event, is irrelevant unless it actually causes the other event. There's no association to just correlation by itself. It needs causality for it to have any relevance whatsoever.
Well, if by causality you mean that's the only possible outcome, that's not true.
I'm
Right,
not
but
saying
Neal,
that.
again,
I'm saying it could
let's
be an
get back
acausal
to
event, but there's no correlated acausal event. You saying X is correlated with Y, and then but yet it's an acausal correlation makes no sense.
Hey,
Neal. I think
let's start from the other direction of human moral responsibility and go backwards instead of trying to go up.
All right, so
Good.
Neal, somebody spiked your drink. You know, you have no knowledge of it. You had no knowledge. You go out and commit a crime. Are you fundamentally morally responsible for that?
Well, did I apply my intelligence to make a decision of causing the crime?
Yes,
Sounds
you
like
did.
I didn't. I did?
No, you did. You certainly did, except you were influenced by that agent.
Yeah.
That agent influenced your intelligence.
Yeah, you administered the drug intelligently. You applied your intelligence.
No. Somebody administered. This is like a case where, you know, his drink is spiked. He had no knowledge of it.
Oh,
but
okay.
The
Okay,
chemical
So
is in
you
his
used your
system.
intelligence in the planning of the crime.
okay, so let's. I like the direction of this discussion, and I want to ask a few more questions to make sure I understand what it is you're asking me. So for the purpose of determining whether or not I acted freely, right? What is the purpose? We want to. Presumably, at some point, I'm going to end up in court, right?
Right.
And
Yes.
the defense attorney is going to try and make the argument that that I did not do this willingly, right? And the question
Right.
is whether this argument holds water or not. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Yeah,
Then let's step
except
back.
we have to understand
step-
that in our current legal system, you know, it's basically based on free will. This
Sure.
whole idea of so the
Sure.
judge is going to so yeah, we have to.
No,
We're
but
trying
even
to
in our
change that.
system, if it was established that his drink was spiked, he had no knowledge of it,
Or
even
brain
our system
tumor or whatever.
would absolve him.
Yeah,
Right. Okay.
brain
So
tumor would be
now,
another good one.
no, those are actually shortcuts that are encoded into our legal framework to help support its sort of ultimate purpose. The ultimate purpose of our legal system is to, for example, and among other things, reduce the number of murders that take place so that people can feel safe, right? We have
Yep.
That's one purpose. Yeah.
Yeah,
that-
humanism is the goal. I think we can all agree, right?
I think
Yeah.
with respect to the laws about murder about which I'm being tried, the goal of the legal system is to reduce the number of people that are killed so that people can
Yeah.
feel safe. Okay?
Though our current legal system has a lot of just dessert type thing where
So
people,
let's
you know,
let's set that
that's
aside because
different.
again,
Let's
I think
just
that's
let's
actually
just boil it up to we're trying to improve society. That's what we're trying to do.
So I think when we see sort of the retributive approach to justice, I think that's actually a shortcut to the ultimate purpose. And the ultimate purpose, if we want to start from first principles to decide whether or not to punish me, from first principles, the question should be, will punishing Neal for this particular crime reduce the incidence of murders in the future?
Yeah, consequentialism.
But
think
Neal,
we're
that's
kinda
only
going off
one
topic.
factor. That's only one factor. In other words, like if the judge or the jury understands that what you did was in no way up to you, that this agent that you were not in control of, regardless of any kind of like benefit of deterrence, you know, that might be, you know,
Well, George, let me
effect or
take it
whatever.
another step. Let me take my logic another step because I've only gotten to the beginning of the point. Okay, the ultimate goal is to reduce the number of murders that happen in a society, and in order to do that, okay, people apply their intelligence to make decisions about whether or not to murder. One of the things they decide, one of the factors that they use to decide, is they think to themselves, am I likely to be caught? And if I am caught, am I likely to be punished?
Right.
Okay, so if the judge were to start from first principles in deciding what to do, then the judge should say, well, were these factors that Neal was considering? Is punishment of murderers the sort of thing that would have discouraged this particular murder?
Yeah, we're all familiar with these
Yeah,
exchanges.
So,
basically you're saying you're applying a utilitarian approach
Yeah.
to, and I think most of us would agree with that, a
Yep.
utilitarian
well,
approach.
I think the moral approach is a
What we're
short.
asking is that person really morally responsible for what
Fundamentally
they did?
morally responsible.
Fundamentally morally
Yeah.
responsible. So even if they didn't get caught, for example, were they morally responsible? You know what I mean by that?
So my
Like
yeah,
even if they weren't get
I
caught
understand what you're
and didn't go to
saying, but I have
jail.
to.
Okay. Okay.
I understand what you're saying. My position is that um, that questions like this are really shortcuts for this entire line of reasoning.
Are you saying that you'd find that person guilty for doing something over which he had absolutely no control?
No, I think in this case I would find him not guilty, and the reason is it is not going to reduce the likelihood that someone else under the same circumstances commits a crime.
All right, but like, deterrence is only one principle in law. There's another principle of fairness. Sometimes, like, we
Yep.
understand that an outcome may not deter crime, but it's still the fair and right thing to do. It's not, deterrence is not an all-encompassing thing. There is this value in basic fairness.
Yeah. I
Well,
mean, what
there's a few purposes.
what
Number
if you
one,
could punish 10 completely innocent people for eternity and improve outcomes? Like the idea is that society, a good society, would get together and say it's simply not fair, so we won't do it. We'll look for another avenue.
okay, so um,
Well,
it's
as a consequentialist, I think these kind of questions, these kind of thought experiences thought ex, experiments are a little unfair to Neal here. so
yeah.
so
I have to
I don't
say
know.
I haven't thought about it deeply, so I don't have a position. But
But
if
it's
the if
inconsequential. We're just basically trying to determine fundamental moral responsibility. The question of deterrence and these societal kinds of goals and aspirations, they're really inconsequential to what we're really driving at here.
Yeah. So here's a better example that I think is a little more in the middle. You have some person who had a really bad childhood, gang member upbringing, really bad peer group, and there's a decision point right at the moment of the brain or whatever. Pull the trigger or don't pull the trigger. The person makes the wrong choice. They're in front of the judge. The whole anti-free will thing, I think, on this podcast is rebelling against the current system in which, for whatever reason, the people in the court are crying. They want to throw fruit. The judge is angry and says, son, you made the wrong choice. You had the options. It was up to you, and you made the wrong choice. Therefore, we are okay with pushing suffering upon you. You will be robbed of these rights. These things will happen. And people are happy. They feel joy because this person will experience suffering. Now, that is one model that is caused by this belief in free will. What we're advocating is you move much further towards rehabilitation, much further towards this is a damaged individual. They were damaged by causes not in their control. They chose their parents improperly. Like that's the kind of conversation we're going towards, and it hinges on this thing of did they have the choice? Did they have the option? And that's when the physics enters into it, and the whole concept of do you have the option to choose otherwise at the moment of your choice? And the whole thing of looking back at the choice into the branching and noticing that they didn't have an option is just to illustrate that you also don't have the option, or at least you don't have control of the option at the moment that you decide whether or not to pull the trigger. And once
so
you realize that, you have to give them a lot more retribution or a lot more rehabilitation versus
so
retribution.
so realizing it doesn't make it true. I think that's my first point. Second point is there are the person who decided to pull the trigger and ends up in jail. He might actually want to be in jail. He might find that a rite of passage for
But
the
that's
gang that he's in.
inconsequential.
Well, that may be true, but there are certainly consequences for the person who is shot.
Well,
No, I'm saying it's
let's just keep
inconsequential
it a
to
pure
our
example.
discussion.
Yeah, let's just keep it a
Yeah.
pure example. The person
Okay,
is
so
like,
there are
yeah,
at least three reasons that we might choose to put this person in jail. Number one, in his current state, he is likely to choose to do the same thing if we put him back out on the street.
That's valid.
We agree with these. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Number two, under the circumstances, this is, he was not influenced or deterred sufficiently by people being put in jail in similar circumstances. And it serves the purpose of deterrence to put him behind bars.
Well, that's where we disagree. In other words, like if we can establish that it wasn't his fault. Well, no, all right. In Daniel's example, all right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, I don't think that you can establish that it wasn't his fault. I mean, that's part of it. And the third thing is, I agree that he should be rehabilitated. Okay, I agree that's an important part of it. And I think, in particular in the United States, I think that's an enormous missing part of our criminal justice system. In fact, I think people who end up in jail are actually taught to be criminals more than they're taught not to be criminals.
Right, but Neal, what
that's a big problem.
You said that we can't, determine that he was completely innocent. We can. That's what this whole free will thing is about. We're all completely innocent.
Especially, Neal, when you say that everything is acausal.
Yes.
Well, wouldn't that mean what he did was acausal? So why are we?
But that doesn't mean it wasn't his choice.
Yes, it does.
I'm lost on this.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Like everything's acausal, but it was his fault.
So the idea that we can divide events into those that are caused inevitably and those that are completely uninfluenced by prior events, I believe is not a valid way of looking at reality.
What's the third option?
It's not his. If it is caused, it's not his fault. If it's acausal, it's not his fault. So how are we getting to it was his choice? And
you're suggesting a third option. Explain it. Describe it.
I'm saying that not every event is either completely uncorrelated or completely influenced.
I know, but Neal, you're saying that, but there's absolutely no evidence, in favor of that.
The Copenhagen interpretation is precisely that.
No, Copenhagen simply says that, we can't, determine whether something, is one way or another until we observe it. That has nothing to do with causality.
No, the Copenhagen interpretation is that it isn't one way or the other until we observe it.
I know, but that, again, even that argument is baseless. There's no basis for that claim.
Well, even worse, it doesn't help you for the guy in the hood who pulled the trigger.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say there's no base. We can just go with the Copenhagen interpretation, but it's not going to solve the problem for you.
Right.
Imagine you have a guy with a brain tumor. Okay, this guy with a brain tumor. This brain tumor causes him to go out and do a mass shooting, and they find out later that the brain tumor actually did press on his certain part of his brain, which caused him to do the shooting. Right. Now imagine you have a different guy that doesn't have a brain tumor and he goes out and does a shooting. Is one more free than the other? I guess would be our question to you. Does one have more free will per your whatever usage you might want?
They also both intelligently plan the attack.
I have to say, I don't know if free will is something that you can measure an amount of on some sort of scale. I don't think
it's either.
We agree with that.
Yeah, it's on or off. We either have it or don't.
So do you think that the guy with the brain tumor had the free will to not go out and do the mass shooting?
If your question is whether we should punish him,
no.
Then I go back.
That's not my question. That's not my question.
No.
I'm just asking if the guy with the brain tumor could have gone out. You could have said, "No, I'm not going to shoot." He could have said, "I'm not going to be compelled to go shoot the people."
I have to say, I don't think I could possibly have enough information to know whether or not he could have made that choice otherwise. Well, if you're postulating that he could not have, then I would say that for that particular choice, he did not have free will. Moreover, I would say it was probably not a decision that was a consequence of his intelligence.
Well, and it's not just a thought experiment. There's tons of these things that have actually happened.
Sure.
Yeah, well, basically, we're saying that you're saying that if he could not have, then he, of his own accord, what I say, chosen not to go out to do the shooting, then he doesn't have free will. And we're basically saying that's the ability that nobody has. Nobody
What's the
has that
difference?
ability.
What's the difference between a brain and a brain tumor at the physics level?
Right.
Our intelligence doesn't operate at the physics level.
Now, intelligence operated when he had the brain tumor. He still sat down and planned everything with an Etch-a-Sketch and a slide rule. Like, he used all his intelligence just the same.
So again, I have to say, if the purpose of asking whether or not he had free will is to decide whether to throw him in jail or not, then
no, that's not the purpose.
No, that's
what is the purpose?
We're trying to show you that if you try to make a distinction between the person with a brain tumor and the person without a brain tumor who does some bad act, for example, there is no real distinction. We'd still have to stop the guy with the brain tumor. We'd still have to lock the guy with the brain tumor up to prevent him from.
So hang on a second.
Yeah, but you don't throw fruit at him.
But there's a much easier way to make that point, okay? Because I said that we are exercising free will when we apply our intelligence to make a decision, right? Then you have to ask me, well, if you have IQ of 50, do I have intelligence? If I have an IQ of 25, do I have intelligence, right? You can keep asking me, I have IQ of 2, do I have intelligence, right? This is not something that we can determine precisely whether a person has intelligence or not.
Yeah, that's heat fallacy. But we already granted that both of these people did have it.
Yeah, are you saying the more intelligent a person is, the more free will they have? Is that what you're kind of saying?
I don't think that free will is something that you can measure on a scale to determine whether someone has it more than someone else.
Then why are you making that distinction?
Because I believe
between the person with 2% intelligence and the person with a lot of intelligence.
Again, this is back to the question of how I became involved in this discussion in the first place. Daniel posted a definition for intelligence that basically said whether or not a proposed definition for free will that basically says that some prior decision could have been made otherwise. Okay?
Right.
The problem with that decision is it equally applies to amoeba as to humans.
Exactly.
Well, nothing has free will.
Right.
That's an interesting assertion, but that's not supported, for example, by the Copenhagen interpretation.
Well,
It is. I mean, you may buy into it, but Einstein certainly didn't. A lot of major scientists didn't. Bohm didn't.
Wait.
Right.
Do amoebas
Einstein
have free
didn't,
will?
and that was the reason that Bell's inequalities were tested, is to determine whether Einstein was correct or not.
Oh no, that's only regarding locality and non-locality.
Well, that was exactly Einstein's arguments. Is that Einstein believed that there are local hidden variables.
Right.
So if you want to. So we now know that that's not true. We now know Einstein's position was not, in fact, true.
But we don't know that we know that isn't an argument for causality, because we still have the option of local variables.
Right. Which is as far as we know not testable. So the question, if this question,
wait a minute, they've actually tested the Elaine aspect experiments. Tested for non-locality. That's in other words, we can extrapolate from those experiments that if a particle is one end of the universe, it can communicate with another because of those experiments. They demonstrate non-locality.
Yeah, we know that there's some events are non-local. We just don't know if a non-local quantum interpretation applies.
It's not a demonstration of non-local causality.
Well, it's basically when you exclude local causality, we have to apply logic to this. When you exclude local causality, you're left with non-local causality. This is an application of Occam's razor. That's the most simple explanation.
When you have the spin of two different particles,
it may be the simplest explanation, but currently it has not been shown that a causal relationship can be established between things that are too distant, essentially, for that causal relationship.
But that's our best explanation. I mean, science is never about proof; it's about our best understanding.
We actually do not have evidence for that position.
Certainly
we do not.
No, we infer it through entangled. We've done experiments with entangled particles, obviously, right?
Exactly.
Yes, but we have not figured out how to use that to essentially convey information.
We actually
or
have. They're working on
Yeah.
quantum computers through entanglement.
quantum computers do not convey information faster than the speed of light.
No, but quantum entanglement does. Quantum entanglement is the conveying of information from one particle to the other,
Yep.
where you have the spin that
Instantaneous.
correlates with the other spin. Yeah, it's an
we
instantaneous
have
spin.
no way of using that to convey information.
All right, but
That is information.
That's inconsequential. I mean,
When we spin the particle one way, the other one reacts.
Yeah,
that is
the answerable
inferred
communication
causality.
system in Ender's Game.
Again, this is back to our human desire to find an explanation in everything. That is, it's true that we would like to infer that, but we actually don't have evidence that there is information conveyed, nor we can find a way.
The problem is it doesn't help free will at all. Like, let's just concede it. Like, we don't know, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't help free will at all.
Exactly.
It actually it doesn't. Okay, so let's back up. If the ultimate purpose of the discussion about free will is to help
Moral
figure out what to
responsibility.
do with something like our system of justice, then
It's more than that.
questions such as whether or not the universe as a whole is deterministic sheds no light whatsoever on the question.
Hey,
Neil, as Trick was
let me
about
just
to
say
say,
this.
it's more than that. It's about basic truth. It's about an
Check this
accurate
out.
understanding of reality.
Yeah, check this out. Check this out. I posit that there is a word that matters deeply to human existence, and that word is deserve. A person deserves to be poor. The person deserves to be rich. A person deserves to be punished. This is a deeply meaningful word for human civilization, and it sits upon free will. It always has, and it always will. So it is not an inconsequential thing to determine whether or not it actually exists.
I don't believe that anybody's use of that word would depend on whether or not the universe as a whole is deterministic.
Oh, yes, it does. So
Well, again, our
people
point, Neil, our point is like it doesn't matter whether it's deterministic or not. Any kind of like an action mechanism for any decision we make prohibits free will. I mean, you're positing a third alternative, but you haven't described or explaining how that might work.
I'm sorry, but I don't think the dichotomy exists the way you describe it.
I know you're saying that, but you're asserting something that you're not explaining. You're simply asserting it without describing it.
Copenhagen interpretation.
Okay, let's just take Copenhagen interpretation and apply it to the person who was going to or was not going to pull a trigger,
Right.
and how we're going to punish this person in court.
Right. So the question is, if you take my approach to criminal justice and say that we want to choose to punish him, if among other things, this is going to prevent him from killing someone else, well, that one it probably will. But let's set that aside. Will this influence other people to be discouraged from doing this?
All right, but
Okay.
you're talking about pragmatic justice. We're talking
Yeah,
about was he guilty or not? You know.
Well, I'm
before
sorry,
we
but
decide
if you want to decide what to do with him, that's what you need to do.
No, but
Okay, so you
we're
just forget
discussing this
who's-
at a more fundamental level. It's not about, we understand and agree with you that there are pragmatic kinds of like contingencies and conventions that we have to uphold, but that's a different matter from whether a person is fundamentally responsible for having pulled the trigger or not. And
Yeah.
we're at this stage, we're trying to determine whether he's responsible or not.
Yeah,
You know,
Okay,
yeah,
so-
apart from everything
so
else.
the
going
question
back to
is, at the
George's
point-
thing,
at the
it
point of
comes down to
decision-
fairness at some point.
So
Right.
at the
Yeah, we're
point
not
of-
really disagreeing, Neil, on a lot of things
Right.
here. So
at the
Go ahead.
time that he made the decision to pull the trigger, okay, let's presuming he was thinking about the decision, presuming he was thinking about whether or not he's going to be punished, okay, and weighing that in among all of the other things that are weighing on his mind, and that he actually made a decision.
Poorly choosing his
That
parents.
thinking process involves physics that is indeterministic.
So non-causal events pop in and
No,
adjust
I'm
as-
sorry. All of the
that
events
is what
at
the
the quantum
Copenhagen
level.
interpretation is.
I'm saying all of the events at the quantum level are indeterministic. They all pop in. Every future event pops in. Some of them
But
are.
he's guilty.
Okay,
They
let's
all-
say
they all
that
pop in,
they're
but he's guilty.
indeterministic. What do you? what do you mean by indeterministic? We have to really clarify this word indeterminism, because there's actually different semantics.
What I mean is more than one possible future exists
but they're not acausal, you're saying. They're causal, or are they acausal?
Well, if by causal you mean only one possible outcome, then they're not causal. If by acausal you mean they are completely uninfluenced by prior events, then they're not acausal either. I mean they are.
Okay, so I'm saying that what I'm saying is you are addressing something that's logically incoherent right now. Right now you're saying that there's this event out there that it has an inherent contradictions. It could lead to there's a causal event, or there's an event. We won't say causal. We won't use the word causal because
set of variables.
You're saying we'll say there's a set of variables that can lead to the possibility of A, and those same variables can lead to not A, basically B instead. Yes. That is a self-contradiction. So basically you have these variables that have self-contradictory properties that are basically
I hear what you're saying.
It's throwing logic out of the window.
Okay,
isn't that a math problem?
I hear what you're saying.
That's the math problem.
But if you say that is a fundamentally incoherent scenario, then you're saying that the Copenhagen interpretation is fundamentally incoherent.
No, I'm saying the Copenhagen
interpretation.
I have problems with the Copenhagen interpretation. That's true, because especially people who address ontological probability. So that's the part that's incoherent. It's logically incoherent.
Okay, so if you believe the Copenhagen interpretation is logically incoherent, then yes, my position is logically incoherent.
Quantum physics are based on mathematics, which are logically coherent. So the very mathematics of even the Copenhagen interpretation is based on our very notion of logic, our very notion that you can't have X and at the same time not X. So you have to throw out those conceptions, otherwise we're just being logically incoherent.
Right. Yes. So okay. I'm saying that I believe that the indeterminism is of the kind that you find in the Copenhagen interpretation.
But how does that give you free will?
If you're saying it's a logically incoherent type, then we have a problem.
I'm not saying it's logically incoherent. I don't believe it is. I believe it's inconsistent with our intuition.
It's a self-contradiction.
How does it give you free will? How does Copenhagen give you free will?
If the definition of free will is that the person applies their intelligence to come to a decision that could have been otherwise, then all of the elements of that definition are satisfied.
Right. So we should treat the person who had the brain tumor and committed the same crime exactly the same as the person who didn't have it and committed the same crime.
So again, now are you asking me if instead of asking me are you asking me whether I think that definition of free will is appropriate for use in the criminal justice system?
I'm saying that the question of whether or not they had the option to do a good or a bad thing should be considered as part of the punishment.
Okay, so I have to say, I'm not sure I believe that definition is particularly useful for the purposes of the criminal justice system.
But Daniel, we're getting into outcomes. All right, Neal, here's the thing. What you have to understand is, let's say the person could have chosen otherwise, right? Now, so like we're positing he had a different, possibility, but with that different possibility, there's two options, or perhaps in your, view, three. That other possibility would be either causal, acausal, or this third thing that, again, you haven't described. But what we're saying is,
I did describe it. It's the Copenhagen interpretation.
No, but that's
different outcomes have different probabilities.
No, Neal, you're just like, when you say the Copenhagen interpretation, you're just stating a philosophy. What I want is kind of like a mechanism that is neither causal nor acausal, because Copenhagen actually sides with acausal.
The mechanism is quantum physics.
For the sake of argument, I actually want to agree with Neal and say, okay, we have events that are not causal, not acausal, even though that's kind of silly, but probabilistic. In other words, the particle has a probabilistic set where it can be 30% here or 70% there, okay? How does that extra. So say someone has a 70% probability of enacting whatever they do based on these quantum events that occur. How does that 30% that could have happened, the 30% probability, how could that have ever been up to them? If it happened to lead to the 30%, basically.
So
Or
again,
the 70.
when you ask me, when you use the phrase "up to them," we're sort of back to you're asking me to use a circular definition.
Well,
but I'll tell you
fundamentally up to them.
what I mean.
You're using
events.
You're using quantum events that have probabilistic outcomes. Okay, so you're saying that obviously when we're talking about free will, we're talking about someone's capacity to do something of their willfulness, right?
Yes.
Like they're willing, they're thinking about it, they're doing something. What you're saying that these not acausal, you're saying that these quantum events can affect their willfulness, that can change their willfulness.
It is their willfulness. This is their body. This is their mind. This is their brain. It's not.
You can't assign attribution just because of physical location.
If the whole point, if I would say that the definition of free will involves applying our intelligence.
Yeah, but we're talking about the otherwise. How could
intelligence is a function of our brain?
How could the intelligence lead to an otherwise when we're talking about probability statistics of quantum events?
So, okay, at some point, the person actually makes a decision. Once the person makes that decision, there is no otherwise. There's only the decision that they made. Okay? So
I'm saying prior to that decision, when they're thinking about all their options, how could they have leaned toward the 30% probability of a quantum event happening rather than the 70% probability of that event happening?
I don't know what you mean by lean toward.
How could they, when through their thinking process, how could that quantum event have gone to the other probability, the other option, the possible option that you're talking about? How could that have been up to the thinking person?
So all of the events that occur within the brain of someone who is thinking can properly be said to be part of the process of them making a decision. That is what it means to make a decision.
But
so you're saying just like, a random event, like a roll of a dice, for example, in your brain that happens, that's part of the process of that's a willful event, is what you're saying.
This is the Denon argument. They're basically saying
because
it's happening inside the body, then attribution is automatically assigned.
So I'm not saying that he makes a decision about every chemical reaction in his brain. Okay, this is one of the argument fallacies that
we are only talking about the otherwise situation. That's all we're talking about. We're not talking about in the causal situation we're talking about. There is no otherwise. We basically consciously will a specific event. I'm saying the otherwise situation, the situation where you would go to a different event, you would change up your possibility. You're saying what happened at the quantum scale.
I'm sorry, there is no otherwise until after the fact. Or to look at it equivalently, every decision you make is otherwise.
Well, okay, if we were going to talk about it in present tense, we can say that there's multiple possibilities. That it's possible that you could choose chocolate ice cream, or it's possible that you could choose vanilla ice cream, or it's possible that you could choose strawberry ice cream. Okay, but we're saying that it really is if everything is causal, there's really only one possibility, and that goes through your filter of you thinking about the three possibilities and eventually deciding on chocolate. But I'm saying is, if causally you would have chosen chocolate, but there's these events, quantum events, that have a probability statistic where 30% it might have happened that it would lean you towards vanilla, how would that be part of your willful process?
Well, first of all, it's not all events at the quantum level are probabilistic. Okay? They're all probabilistic.
So I'll agree
all
with
of
you
the
just
events,
for the sake of argument here. How is that helpful?
all events that are part of the process of my brain thinking about a decision, although I don't control them individually, I own the authorship of the result.
Yeah, so check this out. Yeah, I love that. So check this out. Dennett is saying the exact same thing. Any meaningful decision that emanates from a human, the decision points, even if it was physics and chemistry, happened inside their body. Therefore, they authored that decision, and that's the foundation of moral responsibility.
But Neal, but you're just contradicting what we went through before. Because in the example where your drink is spiked without your knowledge, you go out and commit a crime. You agreed with us that you weren't guilty for that, but your brain.
No, hang on a second. There's a difference between what is an appropriate decision from the point of view of the criminal justice system.
No, I'm not talking about criminal justice. I'm talking about fundamental moral responsibility. You agreed with us that if somebody spiked your drink, you wouldn't be fundamentally morally responsible.
No, I did not agree to that. I did not.
Huh.
I never made a statement. I never supported any position.
So Neal, you're telling me that if somebody spikes your drink at a restaurant,
George, stop.
No, you stop. Hold on.
Fine.
Now, if somebody spikes your drink at a restaurant, you go out and commit a crime. You didn't know that your drink was spiked. You're telling me that you're fundamentally responsible for that crime.
Nope. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying anything about fundamental responsibility.
Well, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the criminal justice system or the pragmatic advantages of deterrence and rehabilitation. We're talking about the fundamental question.
Okay, so I don't think there is a sharp line that you can draw around that question. This is back to my point about IQ, right? When I say it's a matter of applying our intelligence to a decision. Okay? How much intelligence do you have to apply to the decision? How much intelligence do you even have to have? Right? What if we cut out half your brain? Are you capable? Are you free? This is not right. This is a sort of slippery slope argument. You can't answer questions like this by reference to quantum physics or determinism in the universe, because these are not questions that can possibly have well-defined definitions where we can
Wait a
draw
minute.
sharp
What
lines.
exactly you saying we can't define through either determinism or quantum mechanics?
Responsibility, intelligence.
Then wait a minute. Like responsibility isn't quantum mechanics and classical mechanics, aren't they founded on logic? Don't we determine everything based on logic?
Yes.
Well, so we're applying logic to quantum mechanics and to macro classical mechanics.
Well,
and neither allows for free will.
How are you going to? Okay, then what is your definition of responsibility?
That if for example,
I'm sorry, if it's an example, then it's not a definition.
All right, the definition is, again, I've said this before, that to be fundamentally morally responsible for something, we would have to be doing it without anything that's not in our control having compelled us to do it.
Well, then nobody can be fundamentally responsible for anything because the universe is indeterministic at the quantum
That's
level.
our point. You got it. That's exactly what we're trying to say.
But I don't think that definition of responsibility is useful for anything.
Well, that's a different argument.
It's right. Or at least we're on agreement on that. Right. So basically what we're saying, you're right. We need our rules and laws and morality. So we apply a quote unquote pragmatic responsibility. We don't blame people, but we identify people. You know, it's a difference in the way we see them. It's a difference in the way we treat them. It's much more understanding. It's much more truthful. It's much more compassionate, much more intelligent.
I don't think that has anything to do with whether the universe is deterministic, with whether or indeterministic. I think that's a humanistic approach, and I think it's admirable, but I don't think it's based on a deductive process about the way physics works and chains of causes.
Well, we've just agreed that we don't have fundamental moral responsibility, right? So now we're on to like how we address it. And here's
Yeah,
here's
exactly.
how the free will question is relevant. They did an experiment. Half the group they primed to believe that this suspect in a crime or a convict or whatever, he was convicted of it, he had a free will. The other half of the group was primed to believe that he didn't have a free will. So what happened is, like, the free will believers believed that this person should spend twice as much time in prison as the people who understood that what he did was not up to him.
There you
That's
go.
why this
You
matters.
don't mean understood. You mean believed.
Say that again?
Believe.
What do you mean?
You
Sure.
said people
Believe.
who understood it
Fine.
wasn't under.
Fine.
What you
Believe.
meant is
Right.
believe.
Okay. Believed, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's why this matters. You know, like,
Tangible implications.
when this belief in free will, when a friend of yours does something, that you consider wrong or harmful or hurtful or something, and you believe in free will, then, like, you're kind of like want to get him back. Gonna want to punish him. You're holding him responsible. Whereas, like, to the extent that you understand that it wasn't up to him, sure, you might want to take some actions. You might need to, but it will be from a much more understanding and intelligent, perspective,
Well,
not from
George,
the
George, I have a different question, and it sort of relates to this experiment. Um, you, I'm not going to make a moral judgment as to whether one group was more right or wrong in their choice of how the person should be punished. We certainly agree that they had different choices, right? So the question of which set of choices was, quote unquote, better than the other, that should be something that we can measure. We should choose what our goals are for our criminal justice system.
We agree
And we should
completely.
measure what are the effects of our choices in how we treat criminals.
That's a tool that we're
We
going to
agree
use to apply
completely.
to
Absolutely.
whether you believe either one.
Exactly. Which is why I believe the question of determinism versus indeterminism, free will versus responsibility has very little impact on how we should conduct our criminal justice.
How can you say that for
Yeah.
for human, like, existence, for the big questions in the world, figuring out whether or not humans have moral responsibility is not important? That's just, I don't understand how you could have that position.
Well,
You don't do you believe that people judge other people and they think that they're more or less deserving than other people and that they blame other people? Do you not see this happening in the world?
Sure, people do that, and part of the
Okay.
reason they do that, and in order for people to get along in the world, right? We talk about whether the world is deterministic versus indeterministic. As a practical matter, we have to act as if the world is indeterministic, because no one can know all of the possible causes, or whether even there are everything. It does have a prior cause. We can't know that, and even if all of them existed, we cannot know what they are. So we have to act with uncertainty. We have to act in the face of uncertainty, and
So interesting.
so we make shortcuts. We make judgments about people that are based on incomplete information. We have no choice.
Let me try to wrap that up. That's fascinating. So you're actually, it's almost like you're jumping past us towards free will is, or at least determinism, free will, none of it. It's nonsensical completely. So let's just move 1,000 steps ahead and say what is best for the world and build a system based on that, and don't factor in responsibility at all.
Well, sort of, except I think it makes sense for us to use the word responsibility as a shortcut.
Yeah, if we agree that it's pragmatic responsibility rather than fundamental, because again,
Yes.
like, what the problem with free will belief is, like, it encourages revenge. It encourages, like, a person did something, of their quote unquote free will, so they deserve to suffer.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, turn on the
teaching
TV.
people,
Yeah.
instead of teaching people that we either have free will or don't have free will. There was another experiment that Daniel commented on in his blog, where people were primed to think that we have free will or don't have free will, and it turns out that people behave less honestly when they believe that they do not have free will. That was so. There's unfortunate effects on either side.
That's the
Actually,
Catholic
don't
Neil,
know.
problem.
I included that experiment in my last book,
Yeah.
and basically it's a flawed methodology. Essentially, what they did is they primed the free will believers for moral accountability, and they didn't prime the deterministic ones for that. You know,
Okay.
it was just a flawed experiment.
Okay, that may be the case, but I don't think that trying to teach people that the world is deterministic or the world is not deterministic, or that we have free will or don't have free will, is an effective way of moving our criminal justice system in a positive direction.
Let me ask you about this practically. If someone comes to you and they're like, "Hey, I need advice on what to do in my career." I mean, do you say to them, "You know what? It's not really even worth thinking about because we don't really know what the outcomes are going to be." I mean, how far do you take this indeterminism?
No, hang on a second. Just because the universe is indeterministic doesn't mean that that our actions don't influence outcomes. There's definitely correlations. Correlation is not the same as causation. Definitely things that we do.
You can't. All right, we got to go back on this correlation thing because I don't understand what you mean by correlation. Then, what is a correlation without causation?
Yeah, you're using this to try to have both.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I find that that if I do a great job at work, I don't get fired. All right. That's a correlation.
You're saying you're doing a great job at work has nothing to do with you not getting fired?
No, I'm not saying it has nothing to do with it.
Then
I'm
that's
saying
causation. That is definitely helping. That
so
is
when the
causing.
layoffs come, I'm going to come back to you and tell you it wasn't.
Because there's other factors that get you laid off.
Exactly.
But
And
those
we
are
don't
all
know.
causal factors. They're not just correlations. They're causal factors that get you
But
laid off.
here's the
For
point.
example, the
Again,
economics of.
hang on a second.
Okay.
Hang on a second. The point is, no person can know all of the causes.
It's
So
not about
whether they're
knowledge.
causal
It's just
or
about
not
whether they exist.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah,
Right. No, right.
that's epistemic. It's not the same.
Right. You're right. We admitted we can't know the causes, but we can know that there are causes.
Well,
So check this out.
can believe that
Correlation is a tool that we use because we don't know the variables. If we knew the variables, then it would simply be a giant streams of causes.
that is,
Next,
but it
we
could
actually
be
can know the
that
cause
the
of
variables
everything.
don't exist.
We can actually know the cause of everything. The cause, for example, of everything that's happening at this very moment is the previous state of the universe, and the cause of that is the previous state of that universe.
Again,
Yep.
that's one theory, but the point is, again, you keep making the assumption that there are hidden variables. It is an assumption, okay?
Right. So
It's
then
consistent.
there's acausal events that pop into existence in each moment that we have no control over. There's no
Or
in
one could say
between.
that all events are acausal.
But actually, Neil,
All events are acausal.
the
There could be no coherency of events.
That's not true.
Right now we see coherency. That's why we infer causality between correlation because there's coherency of events.
I'm sorry. What I mean by no causation is I mean that in the sense of the Copenhagen interpretation.
right, but all right,
There are
the
correlations in a mathematical sense, and there is coherence, and there is influence, but the influence from one cause to another is not forcing.
You have to address this in terms of levels of fundamental reality. In other words, Copenhagen interpretation, entanglement, local, non-local variables are not as fundamental a level of inquiry as the entirety of the universe evolving moment by moment, stage by stage.
Right. It's a realm in which we can make testable theories and experiments, unlike the universe as a whole, where these theories are not testable.
Right, but I mean, even though they're not testable, there's still a more fundamental truth. In other words, we can't
or
test.
Falsity.
Right, Neil, we can't test whether reality exists or not. But we hold reality existing as a more fundamental truth than the Copenhagen interpretation or entanglement or local, non-local variables. There's this a priori knowledge that supersedes empiricism.
At the macro level, when we're talking about the macro level, we consciously will things, right? So our consciousness allows us to will things, whether or not quantum particles have an effect on our willfulness depends on which interpretation we're talking about, whether or not there's some probabilistic event that happens, is irrelevant to our willfulness. Like if some probabilistic event has an effect on our willfulness, that just makes free will even less of or more of a problem, because we have no control over the probability statistics of a quantum event
So
at all.
we don't have to control all of the mechanisms.
We don't have no control. It
doesn't matter. We don't need any. Again, this is a formal fallacy to say that the parts of something do not have some property, therefore the thing as a whole does not have that property. That is a formal fallacy.
What property are you saying?
I think it's informal.
That we have control over it. Yes, of course, we don't have control over the individual.
No, you're saying that somehow the indeterminism of a quantum event means that we have free will, means that we have some kind of free will to do otherwise, when that probabilistic event has absolutely nothing to do with our willfulness. Willing is a causal event. Willing means that the configuration that we are willing a specific event. If some particles that we have absolutely no control whether they go to the 80% or the 20% area makes a difference in our thinking, then we have no control over that. So
that's
why
a good
are
point.
you saying
the question is not whether we have control over the particles. Look, we don't have to have control over all of the pieces of our brain in order to have control over our brain as a whole.
But you're the one making the case for quantum indeterminism helping our willful possibility.
This is back to the definition. I'm going to go back to the definition that Daniel proposed for free will. That for some previous decision, we could have decided otherwise.
Willfully decided otherwise.
I don't know exactly what that means, but we could say applied our intelligence to decide otherwise.
That's why, that's not the best definition of free will, because it's subject to various interpretations. When you define free will in terms of control, that's much more clear cut.
No, it's actually not. I've been down that path. Trust me, this is getting closer. It's not perfect for the reason Neal described, but control already has its own answer built in as well. So it's not.
Well, to explain that.
I personally like the otherwise definition.
I do
could have
too.
done otherwise of one's own accord, of one's own ability to do otherwise.
Well, hang on a second. So hang on a second.
Control over that otherwise situation. It's not that it just happens. Okay, go ahead, Neal.
Before I make the choice, say to eat ice cream or chocolate cake, before I make that choice, I can't say, I think I'll choose otherwise today, right? Until I make the choice, there is no otherwise. Okay, so whatever choice I make after the fact, when we look at it, that was the only choice that I actually made.
Okay, but if you're looking at it for two different scenarios, one in which every event has a cause, in our scenario, not talking about your scenario, only one of those options was a real ontological possibility, which is you eating the chocolate ice cream, for example, and you could have never eaten the vanilla or the strawberry because causality leads you to that chocolate.
Right.
If you're saying that at the quantum scale, there's some probability statistic that will lead you to the strawberry, that's something that's totally outside of your control. So it's even worse than...
It doesn't need to be under my control. The only question...
It's as out of your control as the causal events prior to your even existence.
Let's back up.
Okay.
The definition of free will is not that I could have chosen otherwise and had control over every variable leading to that decision.
Of your own accord, chosen otherwise.
Of my accord means... what that means to me is through the application of the thinking process.
Well, that's why I say control is
operation of my brain.
Through an application of some random event, of a roll of dice, you're saying that's a willful event, and I don't see how you can get to that.
If that is part of the operation of my brain and my thinking, if that is an inherent part of that process, I don't have to control it. It's already part of the process.
But that's like the next to last domino in a chain. It's part of the process, but it's not the controlling part.
Yeah, you're basically saying
There
that
is no controlling part.
if you're basically saying if there's random dice rolling in your brain, then that is somehow free will.
No, I'm saying that could result in a different outcome.
And
If
it's
the
an outcome
definition,
that's
So do
based
dice.
on a
So do
dice
dice.
roll.
sure, if the
Right.
definition of free will is that a person could have chosen differently.
Could have chosen of one's own accord differently, not
Well,
just
every
differently.
decision, okay, if a choice that is a willful choice that a person has to make of their own accord,
Right. Meaning
if
up to
the
them.
outcome, oh, well, that's beautiful.
Hey, hey guys, I just wanted to let you guys know that we just passed an hour and 50 minutes. And it doesn't seem like too much progress is being made in this conversation because it keeps jumping around.
Chandler, no, we got Neal to understand that we're not fundamentally morally responsible. So, now we're just like dealing with the quantum mechanics and stuff. So we
No,
have made
I'm sorry.
progress.
Whoa, wait a minute, George. What I'm saying is your definition, is that you don't have a definition of fundamental responsibility that has any useful meaning.
Well, that's a different matter.
That is
Basically,
my position about you, is that your definition
Deserve.
is
right.
not.
But that's a different
Deserve
matter. You
is
do
the
agree with
definition
us.
of
You do agree with us. The fundamental aspect of this free will question is not its utility, although we'll advocate for it. It's whether we have it or not. But we agreed that we're not fundamentally morally responsible, regardless of utility.
I have to say, I don't think it's a question that you can answer by reasoning in the way that you're trying to.
Why not?
why.
Because it's not a question that arises out of physics.
Well, logic is more fundamental than physics.
Yes, but none of the you don't have any premises that allow you to conclude either that people do or don't have.
Yeah. Is this premises? I don't know if this is, but if responsibility requires control and we don't have control, we do not have responsibility.
I certainly I would agree that is a logical sequence of reasoning, but I don't think your premises are true. I don't think I don't think it's true to say that we do not have control.
That's
the very thing we're arguing.
That's the whole
why
thing you were arguing.
The issue of control is more central to free will than
All right,
having done otherwise.
let's hone in on control then. I don't know how we're getting control from a random event producing 70 or 30.
So what does control mean?
Control means I think it means you're injecting causality into a system. And I don't understand how you're injecting causality into that 70 or 30 up or down.
So can you give me an example of something at the quantum level that has control?
No.
Yes.
No. Well, I don't think
Absolutely.
so. I don't know shit about this, but my understanding is it's a black
At the
box
macro
and
scale
you don't know
of
what's going on.
particles,
At the macro,
but
it's very clear.
Yeah.
In terms of control at the quantum level, and again, like nothing has fundamental control because even at the quantum level, it's always determined by prior causes. But for example, the reason you can't simultaneously measure the position and momentum of a particle is because if you use a high energy, short wavelength particle as the measuring particle, you will cause the measured particle to change in its trajectory or momentum. So basically, the measuring particle is taking control of the momentum of the measured particle.
So George, here's that's one possible interpretation of quantum mechanics, is that the two quantities are not knowable simultaneously. Another is that they don't exist simultaneously, right? So the first one is that these variables are there, they're just hidden.
Well, but actually in other words, like we know this because in other words, like causality is part of this. Heisenberg prohibits simultaneous knowledge and position because of the action of the measuring particle. So basically, the assertion that the particle does not have either position or momentum until it's measured, that has no logical basis. That, there's nothing in science and quantum mechanics to support that premise.
There's
Well,
nothing in science or experiment to support the premise that it has
yeah,
both.
it's a dual-edged sword because you have the Copenhagen interpretation, which says one thing, and then you have all the other interpretations that say
But
another thing.
wait a minute, like
So
we base our logic and science on our experience. All that we experience, all that we have knowledge of, has this kind of like this attributes of like, yes, you measure it, it had something. In other words, like we it's a priori that like, before we, let's say we didn't see the other side of the moon because of its rotation. We never see it. We finally took a spaceship and we saw the other side of the moon. Now, I think it's kind of like illogical to conclude that other side of the moon wasn't there until we observed it. That just, I understand people have
right.
asserted that, but that just, it's almost as if, a human being is necessary for the existence of inanimate
So
matter.
there's no question, George, but that events in the quantum world are behave contrary to our intuition. And some of that
Right.
intuition is learned, and some of that intuition is instinctual. And for the most part, they support each other. But the from what we know of the behavior at the quantum level, that is not that intuition is not supported.
I realize that, but like you can't apply that everywhere. You can't say just because some things are counterintuitive to our macro world, then everything in the quantum world is counterintuitive.
I agree with that, and I'm not saying that there are no causes at the macro world. What I am saying is that causes are, for the most part, absolute. And much of what we do not understand about the macro world, which is enormous, right? Most, as individuals, any one of us understands only a tiny fraction of what goes on around us, right? I'm saying some of what happens around us that we do not understand, although we might wish to believe it's deterministic because that would fit with our intuition, is influenced by events at the quantum level. There are lots of chaotic systems in the world. For example, weather. Okay, there's the proverbial butterfly flapping its wings in one place, affecting the weather, thousands and thousands of miles away, a couple of weeks later. Well, that's
Which
a
is
real effect.
deterministic.
Pardon?
That
It's a
that one's
deterministic
deterministic.
model.
But yeah,
You could even if the world's deterministic, the flapping of the wings can have that effect.
Absolutely.
right.
But the thing is that demonstrates an example of a place in the world where very small indeterminism can affect what we would seem, or what our intuition would tell us should be deterministic events at the macro level.
Well, we talked about getting control. We talked about control being the central point. And I'm
Exactly.
still not hearing anything around what you're saying with the spin could be, 70 this way, 30 this way. I don't hear how you are controlling that.
I'm not saying that spin is one of the sorts of things we ever even try to have control over. No, I do try and have control over what dessert I'm going to eat. Okay? It doesn't make sense to talk about exerting control below the level
But
of the decisions that I make as a human being.
But the only thing that can give you that alternate possibility, the alternate possibility of you having the vanilla over the chocolate, is those either
those factors.
probabilistic or acausal events
Right.
that you have no control over. So that's why we're saying, well,
Right.
if you have no
But
control over those,
Either way, you
then,
end
then,
up
then
at
it's
no.
not
So
a
hang on a
helpful.
second.
It's not.
Hang on a second.
Okay.
Hang on a second. What I'm saying is a meaningful definition of control, just like a meaningful definition of free will, talks about what we as humans control. Okay.
Right,
And
but fundamental control,
No,
not
no,
pragmatic.
I know
no, no, no,
exactly.
no. I
I know
just
exactly where you're going with this. I mean,
right. I'm talking about things that we as humans do with our right, like select a dessert.
No,
Okay.
I know, but that's not the sense of control that I'm talking about. Fundamental control at its most basic level. You're using the word control colloquially.
Well, what is
Yeah, I mean,
what is,
if you
I
have a
don't know what
muscle
you mean by
spasm in your
fundamental.
leg, if you have a muscle
Fundamental, for
spasm
example,
in your
like, all right,
leg, that
the earth,
oh, go ahead.
the world is round. This planet is an orb, but it appears flat. And like on a day-to-day basis, we kind of like, unless we're going to like fly around it, we're going to walk around on a flat Earth. So there's the pragmatic kind of like appearance of reality, and then there's the fundamental objective description of reality. We're addressing the objective, not how things appear.
So I have to say that if nothing controls anything else, then we don't have causality.
And when we wouldn't have free will, and if something controls other
Hang on a second.
things,
Never mind free will. We don't even have causality.
well, if that's a logical possibility, but that, again, so what we're saying is like, if nothing controls anything, there's no free will. If things are controlled by other things, there's no free will either.
So
I say we have control, Neil. For just so
Well,
I
yeah, me
think we
too.
have causal control, basically. But when you postulate probabilistic quantum events or acausal events, either one of those are totally outside of our control. So
yes, but
so
that
it's
doesn't mean that we don't have. That doesn't mean that we cannot claim authorship of the result.
Well, that in a
but if
legal
the
sense we
results are
do.
based on those, then the authorship is no different than the causality that precedes us. So in an entire deterministic causal universe, all of the causality that precedes us leads us to our state that we are, and then we causally select the chocolate ice cream. So we willfully selected that chocolate ice cream, but it just wasn't free. There was no freedom involved.
Right.
Same thing with the quantum events. If a quantum event causes your physiological structure to choose the vanilla ice cream, it's the same control. You had no control over how that probabilistic event took place, and therefore
You
you
don't
had no
need to.
control over it. Well, then we don't need to in the entirely causal universe.
So hang on a second. The question for free will is whether more than one outcome is possible.
No, that's what I'm
Of
saying.
one's
Like,
own accord possible, of our control possible, of our ability to do otherwise, our own ability. So it's if an event outside of our control creates the otherwise, then it's the same thing as no otherwise, basically,
So
because
I think when we're talking about what a person controls, it does not make sense to postulate them controlling the details of the chemistry going on inside their cells.
I totally agree.
It only makes sense when we're talking about control at the level of a person as to what their physical body as a whole does.
right, and this is where I
I
think
agree.
you're returning to Dennett's thing, which is basically that if it emanated from your body, then that is the definition of control.
But
yes.
then it says that indeterminism can't give you free will. Then it's a compatibilist, and he
No,
says
no,
that
but if you look
determinism
at
gives you free will.
But if you look at how he's a compatibilist, he basically gets there by saying what Neal is saying, which is it came from his body, therefore he gets attribution of responsibility.
Right. So
Right,
I would
we
say,
rejected that.
which
We
means
rejected
that
with the restaurant example.
in an entirely deterministic universe, it all comes from your body as well, right?
yes.
So in a no otherwise situation, it's
You
inside
still
your
have control.
But right. So
We
would you say that's
rejected
free
that
will?
through our restaurant. In other words, like, fine, like, you're in a restaurant, somebody spikes your drink, you go out and commit a crime. We understand
Right.
that you're not fundamentally responsible. So the in your body explanation is inconsequential because of things that are not in control controlling what your body does.
No,
So
I know
let's
that.
back up. Let's back up. With a spiked drink, that's why I asked what the purpose was, and I was told that the purpose was to answer questions about what the criminal justice system should do.
No. The spiked drink was to establish our lack of fundamental moral responsibility. You know, the
Right.
question of what we do about it is ancillary.
I guess my point about fundamental moral responsibility is it's not the kind of thing that you can draw a sharp line around, any more than you can draw a sharp line around intelligence.
Well, so check this out. What if libertarian free will did exist? Then you could start to have a conversation around actual moral responsibility. And that's what this is. Unfortunately, this is the problem we're dealing with.
I don't
Is
think it actually helps you. I don't
most
think
of
it
the
helps you
world
with moral
thinks
responsibility.
most of the world think we have that. That's the first problem. Just to get that out there, most of the world thinks we have it, and that's why we're sort of addressing that problem. But
Well, the flip side, another way of saying it is most of the world knows that, and that's the problem that you're having.
Well, no, it's a
No.
belief. It's
They
a
believe
religious
that.
belief.
They
You
believe
have to
it.
understand.
And you believe the opposite.
Neil, pre-Stoic Greeks, they had words for fate and destiny. They didn't have a word for either will or free will. Ancient Hindus believed everything was destined. There's a whole, you know, there are cultures in the world that have completely rejected this idea of free will.
Right. When the reason is that we have an instinct that's built in and supported by our learning to believe that things are caused and to try and search for causes. But that doesn't make it true.
No choice.
Most people, when given a scenario of entirely causal scenario where event A leads to event B, which leads to event C, they're given that scenario and they're told that that's the scenario that exists in the universe, and then they ask if the person, like they gave one of a person returning a wallet versus a person not returning a wallet. They ask if the person could have chosen otherwise and given the wallet back, and for the other scenario, if they could have not chosen, they said yes to both cases, that otherwise scenario is possible in this entirely deterministic causal universe. That's a logically incoherent belief that the majority of people hold. That's an incoherent compatibilist belief. And then if you ask them other questions, they give you these libertarian ideas that are totally incoherent as well. So the common layperson has these beliefs that are just totally outside of the realm of logic, basically. And we're trying to say, no, that's the belief that we have to say doesn't exist because it's incoherent and it's problematic because it's causing all these problems in the world.
Well, I'm not sure I believe that. It may be that the set of beliefs is incoherent, but another way of correcting the incoherence of those beliefs is to teach people about quantum mechanics and the most commonly accepted Copenhagen interpretation.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't help anything.
If you give them an entirely deterministic scenario, so outside of any quantum mechanics, you give them the scenario that you say, this is the universe we're talking about. This is the universe. Every event, cause A leads to cause B, leads to cause C. Environment.
You give them hard determinism, and they still mess it up.
You give them hard determinism, and they still say otherwise. So they can't process. They're not processing the logic to the understanding of why that otherwise is impossible.
Yes, I guess I'm not too surprised by that, but okay, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate we don't teach people logical thinking better, but okay.
So you seem to be more of a compatibilist, where you have this idea of a utility way of the universe, and you want, and I think we all kind of agree with that as hard incompatibilists.
Well, hang on a second.
This bad belief in free will.
He's not a compatibilist because he's not a determinist.
Yeah, no. So I actually have to say that I do believe that if the universe were deterministic, I don't believe that we can tell whether the universe as a whole is deterministic or not. I don't believe there's any experiment that we could come up with that will distinguish whether or not the universe is deterministic.
I agree with you.
Actually, whoa, slow down. You said you don't believe there's an experiment. Now, here's the thing. Basically, an experiment suggests or implies scientific method. Now, the scientific method that we use to determine our scientific truth requires causality, because scientific method means the same cause, same effect. That's the founding principle.
It requires causality.
Hold on,
George.
Trick. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. So that's the founding principle of the method we're using to scientifically determine the nature of reality, and it's a causal method.
So, George,
Yeah,
are you telling me that
the
we could
method is
never come up with an experiment that supports, say, the Copenhagen interpretation? Or
Absolutely.
we could never construct an experiment that suggests that hidden local variables don't exist?
Absolutely.
Well, we have already
I
done the
disagree with George.
experiments.
No.
No, we
With
haven't. No,
locality,
we
wait a
haven't.
minute.
But I disagree with.
No, Neal. With the local value, we already talked about that. We have an experiment that demonstrates it doesn't exist. But for the rest of it, yeah, you can't prove acausality, because the best you can prove is that we don't know what's causing something.
Okay, so I'll go with that, but I'll also add to that, we can't prove causality.
Well, again, if we're going by science and experiment, if the method we're using to determine the nature of scientific reality requires causality, then I think we can infer
Well, we're
that.
using it as a model, right? Because
Yeah.
a
So, George,
mechanistic model. So what's your point, Trick,
The
on this?
the method itself is causal, yes, but that doesn't mean that the method can't conclude a non-caused event in the
It
universe.
does.
So
If you're using a method that requires causality, you cannot, using that method, demonstrate any manner of acausality, because you're
that's not true.
starting because your
You're not
founding premise is causality.
you're not starting on the point. No, your starting premise isn't every event is causal. It's just that
Right.
you're using causality for your
For determining the nature of the truth. Exactly. If you're using
because
causality as a priori
because
knowledge,
thinking is a causal process, right?
for whatever reason, it's not
No,
about thinking
I
as a
don't
causal
agree.
process.
Yeah.
It's like empiricism requires same cause, same effect. That's the foundation of our science.
Doesn't mean
It
your
does,
results
George,
have to match that.
I'm
Yeah, it
sorry,
does.
but you've taken that's not exactly the way science works.
Well, not all science.
Science looks for correlation, not causation.
Shit, we're back on correlation.
Well, but you have to understand that, like, the first step in science is to look for correlation. The second step is to look for the direction of the correlation, whether it's like, whether one thing is causing the other, whether the other is causing one thing, or whether they're just correlated. So we can determine that through science.
Yes, but it might be that we have a correlation without a causal relationship.
Absolutely,
No.
all the time. Happens all the time.
We can't
No,
have a correlation
no.
without a causal. We can't have a correlation that has any meaning. Like if you say this is correlated to that, then it's not really correlated. We're just observing two different occurrences. There's no
Again,
real correlation.
Again,
Correlation is a problem with how much we know about what's actually happening. I mean, that's all correlation is.
That's one way of looking at it, and it could be that what we don't know is information that does not actually exist. That is the Copenhagen interpretation.
Right.
And we don't have a way of testing whether or not that's true. We postulate because we instinctually prefer the position that any variables that we don't understand really are variables. We just don't know them yet.
I feel like you'd be invalidating much of what science does and the problems that science solves using a mechanistic model of the universe.
Say that again.
I feel like we solve problems using science. We build models. We engineer things. They're all based on mechanistic universe,
right?
Which
and those are all
may or may not be pure determinism.
That's right.
But it solves problems because it's predictable.
That's right.
Right.
And it is a cause.
And even if it's not 100%, even if it's occasionally wrong, that's okay. Because if we're engineers, we try and get things done. And sometimes, sometimes our rockets explode, and that's really unfortunate. But if most of the time they don't, that's really good. Sometimes our computers get the wrong answers, but as long as most of the time they don't, that's really good.
All right, guys, this has been like 2.5 hours. I got to get some rest. So, Neal, it's been great having you on. I'll talk to you guys later, right?
All right. It's been my pleasure.
Yep.
I mean, I think, is Chandler still on? I feel like we should do some sort of wrap up or summary just so we don't.
Yeah, I really haven't been able to talk very much at all, but this conversation was so entertaining between you guys. So yeah, Neal, did you enjoy this episode?
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, and it's not the first time we've had this kind of heated conversation. We had it about morality. We had it about the existence of God issue on other episodes. So yeah, I hope you'll join us again for future ones.
Maybe I will. Sure.
Yeah, okay. So I guess I'll close out this episode because this is like the longest one ever. Okay,
Yep.
you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion with Daniel Miessler, Trick Slattery, David Joseph, George Ortega, and Neal Gafter. And it was the longest episode ever. We had a lot of words thrown around and a lot of different scenarios about moral responsibility. And well, we're still not done, even though it was long. So we'll continue in future episodes. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.